Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy right here. This is the ThruNite Lights T1 little Baton-Style pocket light. First off though, in the name of full disclosure, I want to thank ThruNite themselves for sending this guy along. That's right, they reached out to me, as they've done several times before, and said, hey Nick, you want to check one out? I said, sure, what the heck, but I want to talk about the good, the great, the bad, the ugly. Might be a gem, might be junk, but they still sent it along. We still have to assume this is the best quality controlled one of these guys ever, and I've done my best not to let that affect the nature of my review. But anyways, there you go. Next thing, let's do a little size comparison real quick. Here it is against a standard AA battery, an 18650 battery, as well as a CR123 battery. So this guy is not a very large light. We can see here against some of the other choices for everyday carry. This is the D25A from EagTac. This is another night from ThruNite, which is my general light of choice for these kinds of situations. The Neutron 2C. As you can see here, in terms of size, this is substantially smaller, but actually not substantially thinner. I mean, it's a little thinner, but not substantially. And then here it is against 10,000 lumens. My token ridiculous flashlight, the Nitecore TM10K. So there is that. What we got going on here. Then we'll pop this guy open, and I will give you a chance to stack out the battery here. This is an 18350 cell. So it's like an 18650, except, well, smaller. About 300 worth. And so, yeah, that's what you're keeping in mind there. But it is also a rechargeable cell, and it comes with that cell, so it shouldn't really be a problem for you in the long term. So anyways, let's go ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, the ugly of this interesting little light right here. So to start with, on the good side, this has a magnetic tail cap. What we can see here is if I take a pair of, for instance, tweezers that are metal, I can do this, and it sticks. That is because this has a metallic tail cap, and even with these relatively thin tweezers here, this has enough hold-on strength to, well, hold on. And that is a beautiful thing. That can be very useful, for instance, if you're working under the hood of a car. You just kind of stick this guy using the metal to the top of it there. That holds it in position. For many kind of workflows, this can be a beautiful thing and can actually be quite helpful at, just holding the light in place. So that can be a nice thing for some folks. Next thing, this is a relatively waterproof light. It's IPX8. A lot of them are these days, but that's something to keep in mind. Next thing, this has a two-sided clip. What do I mean by that? Well, to start with, you can clip it on this way, where you clip it in this direction, and that can actually be very helpful, for instance, to put on the brim of a hat. If I have a hat, I can just slide the brim of the hat into this little area here. Then I basically have a do-it-yourself headlamp, and that's a nice little detail. But you can also go the other direction and slide the pocket underneath this direction here, which is cool. It's a little tiny thing, but it's kind of a nice innovation, and it does open up the design space a little bit for other things. So that's good. Next thing, this guy has a battery included, especially given that it's a weird size. That's excellent. Next thing, it is relatively floody, but with some spot. Here, I'll put it on full-on turbo. You can see here, there is definitely a spot in the center here. And then this bigger guy out here. I know people are going to be complaining, why don't you give us beam shots deep at night? But the thing is, I use a phone. That's my only filming camera. I can't do beam shots at night, so that's why you're not getting. But what you'll have to realize is that if you use this guy in a relatively small room, you'll get enough flood around there, so it's not feeling horror movie creepy. It's actually a reasonably good sort of beam pattern for everyday carry light. So that's good. Next thing, the interface on this guy is good. You can double-click it to get turbo. And turbo is a 1500 lumen setting for about 3 minutes, and then it scales back down. You can hold it on for a Firefly mode, which is just a single lumen, and that is a very impressive sort of little setting. And then if you just hold it down, if you just click it once there, what you'll see here, I'm going to hold down the button again. Right now it's signaling me that I was at the low end. Now it's slowly rising. Now it's signaling me I'm at the top end. And then if I hold it down again, you'll see it slowly moving downwards in intensity. This is their infinite adjustment system. Basically, what this allows you to do is turn the light on and then just hold the button until you've got the right amount of light. Now, this is a beautiful thing, and it goes, by the way, between 685 lumens, at least per their ratings, and 15 lumens. So that's good. But, and by the way, on the highest setting, you're getting 80 minutes of runtime. On the lowest setting, 36 hours. And of course, if you do want disco mode, 3 clicks will get you the disco setting there for you. So that's something to keep in mind. But I do like this infinite brightness adjustment a fair amount, because the thing is, it means that if you turn this guy on, you will have exactly the brightness that you need. You can take this to exactly that brightness which is comfortable and no higher. Whereas for a lot of lights, you get a single, basically you get settings. You get individual, okay, jump here, jump here, jump here, jump here. And you know what? That's nice. I like the fact that you have that continuous space because it means that you are using only the amount of light that you need and no more, which ultimately helps your battery life a little bit. Because if your best lighting setting is between medium and high, usually you're going to go high, and so you waste a little more battery. Whereas with this guy, you go right where you need. The one downside to it, though, is time. I mean, see how long it takes to get from medium to high. Here's low, all the way up to high. I mean, is it a long time? No, not necessarily, but compared to something where you turn it on and you click a couple of times to get to your highest setting and realize you can do the double click to get the turbo, so that's not such a concern, but still, it does take a little bit more time. Most of the time, actually, in practical everyday life, I found myself just going straight to turbo, just doing the double click, because usually what I want is a lot of brightness. If I'm just, out walking late at night or something, I want a lot of brightness that is quickly, rather than, otherwise. So there's that. And then finally, it's $49, which is actually cheaper than the equivalent light from Olight, who is sort of a big company in this space. And, I appreciate that. If they're going to do something, they need to be a little cheaper than the competition. $49 rather than usually like $69 is a beautiful thing. So, to me, that's what's good here, is it's $49. The infinite brightness setting is good both for your battery life and for dialing in the amount of light you need. It's a good interface. It's relatively floody, but with some spot. It's got batteries included, a two-sided clip, some waterproofing, and the magnetic tail cap, which for some people is going to be a beautiful thing. To me, though, on the great side is right under this flap right here. That is USB recharge. And not just any USB, but this is a standard micro USB cable port right there. I tried a variety of micro USB cables. They all get in there, and that is great. At this point in time in my life, I am no longer buying lights that don't recharge via standard USB. Whether it's USB-C or micro, whatever, I can live with that. My USB-C would be nice for the future-proofing, but still, it's good. We just need to have non-USB recharge light. We need to have USB recharge because I'm tired of things like weird battery charges. That it's gotten old to me. I would rather just, when I'm done with the day, if I use this guy a fair amount, just plug it into the USB cable that is already sitting there waiting someplace in my house, rather than trying to find, for instance, the Olight equivalent rechargeable has a special cap on the back there where you slap on their charger, and that's got a USB on the other end of it, but where it's a proprietary thing. And if I don't have that cable, I'm up a creek. Whereas this, chances are, no matter where you're at, even, with freaking airports now, you find micro USB, charging ports everywhere. So, not that you need to charge your flashlight at an airport regularly, but it's a point of example. And the other thing is, this is nicer than one of the other hacks that a lot of makers are using to make themselves, to give themselves a rechargeable light without actually changing the design of their tubes and circuitry, is to do these things, whether you use a rechargeable battery, basically, where it's a 16340 battery, but it has a USB recharging circuit built into the top, which means that you need to fully disassemble the light in order to be able to actually do that, and that's not something I'm particularly in love with. So I like the fact that it has the actual, because there, if I'm charging it that way, all I need to do to go is just pull the thing, close the flap, and I'm good to go. As opposed to, okay, hold on, let's fit. Look, it's not a big deal, but I will gladly pay a small price in terms of the time and just, plugging it in order to have fewer cables in my life. And relative to proprietary snap-on cables, those might be more convenient at some level, but I'd much rather have something I can use all the time. So standard USB recharging for me is great. On the bad side, oh, by the way, I should get a couple of quick measurements on this guy while I'm doing this. But on the bad side, to start with, oh, look, actually, that's a nice example. This just grabbed right onto my caliper there. One of the bad things about this guy is that this, yeah, we'll get there later on. Sorry, that's just amusing me. 2.74 inches overall. And then the diameter here at its sticker points are going to be, about 0.96 inches. So there you go. Anyways, I digress. One thing on the bad side, though, speaking of those dimensions, is that cylinder lights like this guy are feeling less and less like the solution every day. Because although you definitely, getting around it's good for, some replaceable batteries, there were a lot of really good kind of lights in a different form factor. This is a light that is almost equivalent in brightness. The lumen scale, you have to remember, is deceptive. And although this is nominally 750 lumens. It feels in practice just about as bright on turbo as this guy does at its 1500 lumen turbo. It's not a huge distinction, but this is way more convenient to carry. And so I have been carrying more of these kind of candy bar style lights. This is a big old candy corn. That's a different thing. Candy bar style light relative to these tube ones. They just seem to work a little better for me at this point in time in my life. So that's something to keep in mind. I think these are probably on the way out in favor of things like these as time goes on here, especially as USB charging catches on. Next thing, unfortunately, the clip is not really super well positioned for clipping. Because if you want to go into your pocket, for instance, this way, there is just very little ramp back here to actually get up under the clip. In every case, I found myself having to do this. Or worse still, if you've got it this way, you can see here that this part of the head is actually thicker. And so whatever ramp there was actually there really isn't. So you have to really force this guy into the pocket, or as I ended up doing, lifting it off like this with my finger. It's just not a great approach for clipping. There are definitely dual position clips that do a better job of that, and, you know, make things a little nicer for you. So I'm not a big fan of the clip positioning here. I kind of wish it had gone a little tiny further and ended up on this surface here, although that could interfere with the buttons, so I kind of get it. There may not be a great solution, but there hopefully is a better one. Next thing, the turbo mode on this guy is a little finicky in that if you, so the way you turn on turbo mode is you double click. But if you double click and you hold it there, hold on. Let me make sure. Okay, no, I'm in their adaptive mode there. So if I double click, that's fine. But if I click once and then hold down, which feels also like it should be a double click, that doesn't turn on turbo. So on a number of occasions, I've gone for turbo, but I click once and then kept holding, and then that wasn't turboing anymore. And there's also occasionally, and I don't know how to predict this, but there is occasionally a stutter before you turbo. I'll see if I can trigger it here. Oh, damn it, I turned on disco mode there. Yeah, it's a little tricky sometimes, as opposed to lights where it's kind of dead simple, where it's just like hold down this button or something like that, or just double click, and no matter whether you double click and then hold, or double click and then let off, that's not something I love. That element of the interface was the only thing that I occasionally got wrong. Part of it, I'm sure I would get used to it if this were the only light that I ever carried, and that's one of the problems I always have, is I'm always carrying different lights with different kind of, well, frankly, functionalities, different interfaces. It's hard for me to adapt to any one, but that wasn't something I particularly loved. And then finally, on the lockout side, this guy has a lockout mode, where if you are already on and then you hold down the button, oh, no, wait, hold on, what was the lockout version for this? It's right, you go into moonlight mode by holding the button down, and then once you're in moonlight mode, you hold the button down again. That engages lockout mode, which means I can no longer, turn the light on. However, I can turn that lockout mode off just by holding the button down again. Now, guys, this is why we can't have nice things. Lockout modes are designed in order to, let's say you want to throw this guy in your backpack or something like that. That way it cannot turn on. Even if something, for instance, ends up pressing up against it. If I toss this in my pack and a book or a clipboard or something is up against it, that could mean that the light would just turn back on there. And it shouldn't be a huge deal, especially if it doesn't turn on into turbo or something. But the fact is that just holding down the button is something that you want lockout mode to prevent rather than what you want lockout mode to do. This has the advantage, though, of a hardware lockout. Because if I turn the head of the light a little bit, then it's not going to turn on no matter what. This isn't mode. This is just I need to retwist this, and then it turns back on. But still, that feels like a very poor choice of lockout design. If it was like double click and hold to get out of lockout mode, that makes more sense. But as it stands, that's kind of lazy. So to me, that's what's bad here, is the lockout mode is disengaged by doing exactly the thing that lockout mode is designed to prevent from being a problem. The turbo mode is a little finicky to trigger. The clip is poorly positioned for clipping, and cylinder lights are just feeling less and less optimal every damn day. The ugly front, there are two ugly issues here. To start with, there is no way to remove this magnet. One thing that I like about some generations of the Olight Baton, which I think, let's put it this way, it is a very similar design in some ways, is that it has they've got that magnet in the back there too, but that magnet can be removed. you can unscrew this and then pop that magnet loose. Whereas on this guy, I have been unable to find any way that I could do that. It is possible that if I were to try and get in there and pull out this spring, I might be able to pull that off. But as of the moment, it really feels like that magnet is hard mounted in there. Now, for a lot of people, like I said, that can be a pro, but for other people, it might be a con. For instance, if you work with a lot of mechanical watches can be magnetized by hard magnets, hence my wearing the quartz watch as I'm doing this review. That's probably over dramatizing the issue, but still. So there are going to be people for whom, if you have a random flashlight on your desk, you don't want it to be grabbing onto other things on your desk as you're working with it. And this is a strong enough magnet to support the weight that it is non-trivial. So I wish there were a way to remove that. I think that's a good idea to give people that option. Then finally, on the bad side, unfortunately, the color on this light is just not very good. And I'm not going to be able to show that off super well. But what you'll actually see here is there is a yellowy portion here that's a very warm color. Then in the middle range here, there is sort of a cool blue. And then there's another ring of yellow out toward the end. ThruNite continues to have problems with lights where they're using a neutral white coloration, but the other parts of where it kind of goes from one color to another color to another color. It doesn't impress me really at all. And it's something that they keep troubling with over and over and over again, and honestly, it's getting pretty old. Because I've been commenting on this every damn light they release, and each time it just happens again. And, at some level, look, I mean, for a lot of people, that's not a major issue. And if color correctness is really a problem, then you go out, you get yourself a light with like a Nichia emitter or something like that. You'll do a lot better off. But honestly, guys, it's distracting is what it mostly is. If I'm actually using this to look at something and I have to wonder about what color something is depending on where the light is, pardon me, around it, it's not good. The fact that you can see it on a black surface here through a camera where it's yellow, blue, yellow. No, just no. This is something ThruNite needs to work on. They need to do better at, because right now it's just not great. I would much prefer a consistent light color, even if that drops the lumen output a little bit more. So, to me, that's what's ugly here, is that the color coming out of this light is bad, and frankly, it's worse than a lot of what I've seen out of ThruNites, and there is no way to remove that magnet. Final conclusions. Look, this is a fine light. Although it does feel very derivative, I think it's a nice derivative, right? It's got some nice features, like a standard USB recharge rather than a proprietary USB cable in the back there. It's got the infinite brightness thing, and it's a decent enough price, $49. That's fine. And honestly, the efficiency gain from having exactly the right brightness that you want is something that's hard to overstate. That is a beautiful thing. I love seeing the proper brightness and being able to set that in. Beautiful. So, at some level, that works pretty well. And I think this is really the key here. The fact that it is a standard USB recharge, that's just nice. I hope to see this more often in the world. Unfortunately, though, it does come with some substantial downsides. It's got a relatively slow mode adjustment by virtue of that, the infinite setting there. It is a form factor that I think is becoming less and less compelling as time is going on here in favor of things like your candy bar style lights. It has a very finicky turbo mode. Maybe not very finicky, but it's certainly finicky. It has a fixed magnet in there. The lockout isn't really a lockout unless you consider the hardware one. And the color rendering is super unimpressive. This continues to be in a lot of ways ThruNite's biggest problem. And if they were able to deal with that, I think it's going to be a more compelling light. But they seem to show no signs of changing it, and it's uglier here than usual. So, you know what? I think, like I said, this form factor may be on the way out anyways. There are lights out there like this guy, the Nitecore Tip 2, and I don't know that this has its own set of issues. Keep an eye out for a review of this, but at the same time, it offers very similar performance and output, but although with lower run times, that's for sure. It's a smaller battery, but it does it in a much more carryable and compelling size, and with better coloration and whatnot. So, if you're just looking for a short-term use backup carry, which for a lot of people, that's what this is. It's not the light that you have with you all damn night if you're out on a search party or something, but it's a fine light to throw in your pocket in case you need a light. I think it works fine, but in a couple of years, I suspect lights may end up looking more like this on the regular basis than looking like this. Ultimately, though, my feelings here, final conclusion, is that it's fine. If somebody were to hand you one of these guys on the street, I think it's a very nice piece. And it'll work. It's a good light. It'll do fine. It'll light things up for you. It's not the best choice, absolutely, and the color thing remains pretty ugly, but it will do. It will do the trick. It'll get you through the night. But I can't say say that it's a light that I'm going to recommend you go out of your way to buy. So anyways, there you go. Hope this has been interesting to you, and have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.